Hey everybody, welcome to our last video of this series on macromolecules. I'm sorry you won't see my smiling face in this one. The camera is having some issues. I am very challenged with technology this semester, but we'll go on with this. I think we'll be okay. So in this video we're going to look at macromolecules. We'll consider the terms monomer and polymer. What are those? How are polymers produced from monomers, and how do we get monomers from polymers? What element do they all contain, and what are the macromolecule groups? That's what we'll consider here. First, let's start in kind of an unusual place. Why do we eat? The question may seem a little funny because we eat because we're hungry, of course, but hunger is just a biological urge for us to take in food. From our food, we're going to get the energy, the chemical energy from the bonds of the molecules we eat. We're also going to get the raw material, once again these macromolecules, to make more body tissue, and we'll discuss what they are in just a second. We also need nutrients for our metabolism. When you think about vitamins and minerals, what are vitamins and minerals? Well, they are going to be needed to make our enzymes work, for example. And of course we need water from our food. So I give you this slide to get you thinking about we have to take these things in. These are the materials, the proteins, the carbohydrates, the lipids, the nucleic acids that we need to make our body work. Some of these we do manufacture, but of course then again we need the raw material from which to manufacture them. So let's look at macromolecules this way. Macromolecules, this term macro means large. I don't know why I drew a line through there. It means large. So these are going to be large molecules, but these are made from monomers. Monomers are going to be these single units. Think about a brick wall. Individual bricks are the monomers. Those are the building pieces, the blocks. They make up the whole brick wall, which is the polymer. So here you see monomers, these individual puzzle pieces, can be strung together to make the polymer, the bigger one. So this term polymerization sounds really fancy. All it means is we're going to string these things together to make a polymer. So monomers, these single units, these blocks, are going to be joined together to make a polymer. Why do I mention that in discussion of macromolecules? Because all the macromolecules are going to be made of monomers, individual building blocks that then give us this large macromolecule, these large macromolecules that we're going to be talking about here. So this is just an example. Here you see glucose is a simple sugar, and you see that it is just one, a simple molecule here. It's just one of the building blocks that, when they're chained together the right way, can, in this case, make starch. So that's just an example of how monomers can be put together to make polymers. We'll look at the process in just a second of how that occurs. So, the second is now. To make a polymer, we're going to need building blocks. We're going to need individual pieces. So in my little diagram here, this is, we'll call this one A and this one B. These are individual building blocks, and we want to join them to C. We want to actually add these together. So to add these together, the process is going to be called dehydration synthesis. In the presence of enzymes, we can actually join these two building blocks to this one to make this larger one, this polymer. But notice why it's called dehydration synthesis. Here we have an H and an OH. They are going to be removed. That is the dehydration part. Enzymes are going to make this bond, and we're going to invest some energy to give us this bond here. Now this is basically polymerization. We have joined some small building blocks to make a larger thing, in this case a polymer of some unknown nature. But here we have joined by dehydration synthesis. Enzymes are going to be used. We're going to remove water, invest some energy to actually then make this bond. Now the opposite is also true. How can we make monomers from a polymer? Here is a large, relatively large polymer with its 3 individual building blocks. In this case, other enzymes are going to come in, and we're going to use water, and we're going to break water into H and OH. So when we break that bond open, when we break this bond right here, we're going to put an H on one of the monomer sides and an OH on the other. This is called hydrolysis. Hydrolysis means to break water. That's what we're doing here. To break a polymer into monomers, we're going to break water. We're going to, if you want to think of it this way, we'll stabilize the ends of each of these by breaking the water. And as we do, we're going to liberate or release some energy. So this is how we make monomers, how we make the small pieces. Over here is how we make polymers, how we make the larger molecules. The terms we used in a previous video, we talked about anabolism and catabolism. So over here, this is anabolism because we're making larger molecules. Over here is catabolism because we're breaking large molecules. Just some quick examples here. This is showing you how amino acids are joined. Again, you see an OH here. Here's the OH. Here is the H. We're going to remove those, and they are present here in our chemical reaction. And the bond that results is going to be called a peptide bond. It's actually right here. This is the peptide bond that's going to form after we remove H and OH from the 2 ends of amino acids. And now we have a dipeptide. Now we have 2 amino acids joined together. Here is showing you glucose and sucrose, how we can make amylose by, once again, we're going to remove water. And it's not as easy to see on this one where it's occurring because it's showing you a large polysaccharide here. But if you want to envision it right here, here is the OH, here is the H. We're going to remove this. We'll have left over this oxygen. That's this oxygen right here, and that gives us this bond. So once again, when we put together molecules to make polymers, that is dehydration synthesis, and that's an anabolic reaction. And notice it's the same over here for proteins as it is for sugars. And in fact, it's going to be the same for all the macromolecules we look at. So let's briefly highlight them and what's features of each. So the 4 big macromolecule groups: carbohydrates, also known as polysaccharides, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. From 3 of these, carbs, lipids, and proteins, we derive energy. We don't really associate nucleic acids with energy. We'll look at each of their functions here in a second, and you'll see nucleic acids really are not the primary energy molecules we're focused on from organic compounds. So you'll notice how each of these have these different groups, but all of these have ultimately their monomers, their building blocks. Monosaccharides, simple sugars, are the building blocks of carbohydrates. Fatty acids and glycerol are the building blocks of lipids. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, and nucleotides are the building blocks of RNA and DNA, which are examples of nucleic acids. So we'll do a quick survey here. Carbohydrates. Again, you're seeing some examples of carbohydrates here. We're looking at the monomers first. So these are the small building blocks. Here's some examples: glucose, fructose, galactose, deoxyribose, and ribose. Obviously, whenever you hear ose, we're associating that usually with a monosaccharide. You can join monosaccharides to form disaccharides. Here's an example. If you join glucose and fructose together, you get sucrose. Glucose and glucose together, you get maltose. Galactose and glucose, you get lactose. You don't have to memorize these, but just know in every case what reaction formed them: dehydration synthesis. If you get long chains of lots of monomers chained together, there are several examples of this, of carbohydrates. Here's one of them. This is glycogen. Glycogen is an energy storage molecule in us. You'll also see starch as an energy storage molecule in plants. You'll also run into cellulose. Cellulose is a structural carbohydrate rather in plants. So what are carbohydrates used for? These are really mostly about energy, and we'll get into them more in class. And as we mentioned before, like in cellulose, sometimes they have some structural functions as well in some forms. But again, notice that all of these are all chained together versions of that. Monomers make polymers. Monosaccharides make polysaccharides. In this case, we're talking about glycogen. Okay, lipids. Lipids are made of, again, they're two monomer components. Glycerol and fatty acids make up, in this case, triglyceride. Essentially, these are the building blocks of lipids. You see here a typical structure of a phospholipid. This is something that we associate with cell membranes, and we'll talk about this more when we discuss cell membranes in class. And this is showing you a steroid, so just another form of chained together components. Lipids are used mainly for energy, for protection, when we think about like lipids in around our organs, structural, and for steroid hormones. So again, here's an example of a steroid hormone. This is actually cholesterol. So lipids are going to be energy, protection, structure, and steroid hormones. That's their function in the body. Okay, proteins. It's cut off a little bit on the side here, but proteins have many roles: transport, regulation of pH, blood clotting, structure, body defense, metabolism, and enzymes. So these are quite important. What you're seeing here are some examples of amino acids. These are the simplest, these are the monomers, if you will, of proteins. And then you're seeing them chained together to form secondary, tertiary, and quaternary structures. In other words, as proteins are put together by their amino acid sequence, they fold up and fold up and fold up till they get to that specialized three-dimensional shape. And we said it back in the enzyme discussion, proteins are all about their shape. So if the right amino acids are in place, we get the right structure. If we get the right structure, then we have a functional protein. Finally, nucleic acids. We don't mention nucleic acids too much when we talk about metabolism here because we're not talking too much about energy. The nucleic acid's main function is to store hereditary information, as we associate mainly with DNA, and then protein synthesis, which we associate with both DNA and RNA. But the monomers of nucleic acids are nucleotides, and I don't have one on the screen to show you here, but they have three pieces to them: a base, a sugar, and a phosphate. If you've heard of adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, you've heard of the bases of DNA. Well, those bases are going to also be part of nucleotides. Nucleotides are like the bricks. If you assemble them in the correct order, you get DNA or RNA. So again, their main function is going to be associated with either hereditary information, storing your information you got from your parents, your genes, or making proteins. Okay, and finally, let's mention the one element that we find in all of these, and that's carbon. These are organic molecules. Organic molecules are molecules that we associate with life because they contain carbon. Carbon is an interesting element because it can make up to 4 bonds. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about valence electrons in class, and that's on purpose, but we talked about completing their shells or becoming the most stable they can be. Carbon, because of just its arrangement of electrons, can form up to 4 bonds. So this term tetravalent means it can make up to 4 bonds. It can make long chains and rings, and it's a very versatile element. You see carbon all throughout. This is an example you see throughout here of this is going to be it's like a protein sequence. So here you see this ringed structure. So you get these long chains of carbon, or you get these rings of carbon. Here you see a double bond in carbon. All I want you to focus on here is carbon's a very, very, very versatile element, and therefore it can make lots of different kinds of molecules that we associate with life. But again, to review, our 4 major molecules are proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids, and we'll spend a little more time on these in class. That does it for this video. Thank you very much.